Well, right on. What do you think of the movie? You saw it. You saw it twice
Yeah. Wait, did you actually go drive 40 miles two
again.
times? You did?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I
I was
did
wondering
again.
whether you just got the bootleg like
Uh,
like I did.
on Tuesday afternoon, I said, or Tuesday morning, I was like, I need to see this again because we're going to wait till Saturday. I was like, I might as well see it again. So I
Right.
called a friend and said, do you want to go with me? And he said, sure. So we drove
Okay.
it again and drove back. So
Right. Did it change your perspective on the film or your
I could
appreciation of it?
I could definitely understand it a lot more. I mean,
Yeah.
going through the second time, I understood the dialogue a lot better. That was the problem, is that when I first watched it, I couldn't understand probably 50% of what they were saying, and I kept going, "What? I can't." The mixing was terrible, and it seems to be a consensus because I saw a bunch of YouTube videos pop up and say that it's really bad. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, it is. You know, this is the good thing about living in a non-native English speaking country. So
Yeah,
we just have the subtitles. So it
yeah,
really wasn't even an issue. But I don't really like reading the subtitles. So whenever I watch on Netflix, I usually turn off the subtitles just
yeah.
because it's a more organic experience, right? And so I tend to not try to look at the subtitles even when I'm watching in the cinema. But I did notice as well that I'm like, I have a hard time following what they're saying, so I'm just gonna read the subtitles. That
Yeah.
really saved me. But the second time around, um, I did notice it more. There was a couple of scenes where I wanted to, write down a quote.
Uh-huh.
It's like, oh, this might be interesting, but I just couldn't follow. It's like, I don't know what they're saying, and so I need to go look up the transcript you sent me
Yeah.
to figure it out. Yeah, no, I think it's been an issue with his movies, especially his recent ones, where the sound is just the music is so loud and all the ambient sound is so loud, and then they're all talking through masks and all this sort of stuff. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. My appreciation of this movie has been grew the second time I watched. I liked it the first time, but then I really appreciate it a lot more the second time around.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's like it was more of a relaxing experience to watch it as well, because you're not constantly sort of trying to
Yes.
play catch up with what the story is,
Yeah.
what is going on, the whole mechanics of the whole story, and so it was easier to follow and to sort of appreciate also more on an emotional level, I suppose. Um, and then now that I've sort of analyzed it and sort of let it crystallize in my mind a little bit, I appreciate it even more. So I'm really on this uphill, like this upswing, where I'm appreciating this movie a lot
Yeah.
more than I did the first time. But I don't think it's his best movie. I
No.
probably
No.
still won't think that after a while.
So
But
what is your favorite Nolan film? You didn't say.
I think it's probably the Dark Knight. And
Okay.
it's probably, if that counts, because it is a trilogy. But I think even as a standalone movie, that is
It's a fantastic movie. The
yeah. I
themes
think
there, everything.
that's right. I think that's just one movie that I can just keep watching over and over. And I have, because I did my own analysis, and I did for Jonathan. I did 2 Batman videos, and I had to watch it again and again. So I watched it like 5 times in like 5 or 6 times in very short succession. And I enjoyed it every single time. I didn't skip ahead or anything. I mean, I did a little fast forward the last time I watched it, but it keeps being very enjoyable, and it's one of those movies that is almost perfect.
Yes.
Um, and I think a lot of his other movies, they have some usually sort of technical issues with the sound, or there's like a lack of characterization, or there's something that isn't quite right, or isn't as tight as is the Dark Knight. That's what I think. I don't know. Yours is Prestige, right?
Prestige, man.
Yeah.
I think it's well directed. I think it's well shot. I think that as far as characters go and everything, it's a movie that sells a twist, does the twist, and but still makes sense of everything. I think it's the
Yeah.
most balanced of all of his movies.
Hmm.
Memento, like I said, is great, but it's almost like a one note thing, because obviously you get it, you understand it. He doesn't understand, he won't get it, he's not going to understand, and we
Yeah.
follow along, and I appreciate it for that. I think it's fantastic for what it is, but I think for the full rounded picture of what a movie can be, that whole idea of the pledge, the turn, and the prestige, just very well done. So
Right. Have you watched, what's his first movie? The Following?
I have not seen it, but I
Okay.
know of it.
The Following really, I don't know if it's a student film. I don't think might have been like the first movie he did after he didn't actually go to film school,
Nope.
right? But it kind of feels like it is sort of like a student film.
Yeah.
And then Memento is really where I feel like it's more of an experiment than and actually it is a full-fledged movie, but it's sort of, he's obviously the movie's really him trying to deal with this with like the concept of time and how we make like meaning making really,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's just him sort of exploring that idea, and then
And
after that he go
clearly
ahead.
independent, low budget. Clearly he didn't have a
Yeah,
budget. Clearly it was independent, small
yeah,
sets, small cast,
right.
but clearly caught someone's attention to get some of the actors he did.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a very inventive movie, and I think all his movies since then have been very creative like that, and it really sets the tone, I think, for the rest of his movies. Although it's like you said in our previous earlier talk, he has moved his the way he tells stories has developed, or like what he's interested in has developed over time, in the sense that those earlier movies are not as they explore certain ideas, but they're pretty dark movies as well, most of them,
Hmm.
you know. And then now these more recent movies, it's more about, you know, him also being a family man, and I think they have a more um, optimistic, usually more optimistic tone towards the end.
Yeah. And
And
did you get that in Inception where he says that it's better to have a euphoric or good experience than a negative one to communicate or have an idea implanted? It's better to have a more cathartic experience than to have a negative one.
Oh
So he
no,
does say
no, I've
that,
heard.
and so he's trying when he tries to get it, he doesn't want to. Like Memento is fairly like depressing because you're like
It
he's so
is,
sad
yeah.
at the end, and I would say that he did Insomnia, which was kind of depressing. Although that's another remake. That's a remake from a Scandinavian film. I don't
Yeah,
know if it was Norwegian or Swedish or whatever.
yeah.
But yeah, so and even the Prestige is a little bit dark in the end. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
which you kind of somewhat have a slightly happy ending, but for
But yeah,
some,
but there's already like a sort of a switch there, sort of, because it is pretty bleak, but then there's also some, you know, sort of a happy ending
sort
in
of,
a
yeah,
way, right? And
yeah,
then from Batman Begins, obviously a Dark Knight doesn't really have a happy ending, but you have to see that the three movies together, I suppose,
right,
to have the full picture. And but from that point onwards, you know, Interstellar, Dunkirk, and now Tenet,
yeah.
all I think very similar, hit similar notes.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think we'll talk about that as well once we discuss the movie. Um, so yeah, I think I really like Dunkirk as well. I don't know if you watched the video that I did on it. Um,
I don't know if I have.
I think, I mean, you were
Is that,
talking about it
is that the
earlier.
silent? No, you didn't do the silent film one. That was like Stories of Old did the whole silent film. You know, Dunkirk's like a silent film. It was
That was yeah, he did that.
Tom.
It got claimed though, so I don't know if it's
Yeah.
still. I think it's still up, but it was claimed by Warner Brothers,
Oh,
because I
really?
just asked him, like, I wonder if Nolan watched that video, because it went completely viral, and it was, you know, it was a very smart and succinct way to sort of show the visual storytelling qualities of Christopher Nolan, how he was trying to emulate the silent era
Hmm.
movie making and storytelling. And I think this is also why his characterization is sometimes a bit lacking, because he's such a visual storyteller in many ways.
Yeah.
And even though he has all these complex plots, usually he really tries to hone in on like the visual aspect of it as well, and try to tell a story just with images. And I
Yeah.
think I think especially with Dunkirk, obviously that was the biggest example of that. If Tenet a little less, but I think it really, and for some people I know, they really don't like that movie.
Hmm.
Some of them think it's not historically accurate enough, and other people think it's not emotional enough. We don't know the characters; they're hard to understand as well because of the sound mixing,
Yeah.
and it's too much noise and all this sort of stuff. And you know, I kind of agree with the historical aspect. There's some weird mistakes in the movie, but to me, it's more important that the story works structurally than if there's, you know, some superficial things that don't work. I'd rather have it be like that than the other way, that the story doesn't work, but that all the technical aspects are really good, you know,
Yeah.
because then you don't want to watch the movie again
Hmm.
if it doesn't resonate. But yeah, I think Dunkirk really was almost, the characters are really not important. It's all about experiencing it with the characters and sort of identifying. It's almost as if you're one of those, you know,
Right.
unnamed soldiers almost. And it's more about, I think the movie Dunkirk isn't really about the historical reenacting this historical event of Dunkirk, but rather it's about showing revealing the Dunkirk spirit. It's more about the Dunkirk spirit, like
Yeah.
this feeling of going into this breakdown of the army and this complete confusion and chaos and going down and down and down, and then eventually this sort of miracle that happens, and this sort of lifting up into this spirit that kept the UK fighting on, and what had actually happened, they really did feel the historical record on it is also very clear. They did actually feel that in the beginning they felt that the Germans were way stronger, and then all of a sudden they had this British sort of spirit to fight on. And I think he did a really good job in visually showing that descent, and then that ascent towards the end, and to go home and you see the white cliffs of Dover, and that contrast with all the fog and the confusion on the beach. I think it's very strong. And then the end with Tom Hardy's character going down with the sunrise, and he lands his plane, and he sort of in defiance sets his Spitfire on fire. And I think it's you could see that as a very sort of bleak ending as well, but it's not. It really isn't. It's like,
because
it's like you say, like,
the end of the war. You know what's going to happen, so you feel
we know what's going to happen. And I think in a way when you talked about. I mean, I don't want to compare it too much to go, this is the same as the Bible or Mark, but it is the same as, this is like, obviously 1940 wasn't a good year for the Allies, and up to like the end of 1941, things didn't get much better.
Right.
They got worse.
Yes.
But still, we know what happened in the end.
Yeah.
And you have that sort of, that fire then becomes more of a marker. This is not a marker of defeat, but of defiance, and of the spirit that grew and eventually defeated the Nazis.
Churchill going out and walking through the rubble and everything like that. We're going to overcome. Yeah,
exactly. So that I thought it was really just perfectly executed.
Did you? So this is what I found was fascinating about Dunkirk was, so he took a moment in history. Obviously, and he doesn't give much characterization or anything like that. And it's not a very, I would say, on the surface, very interesting story. I mean, it's about a bunch of guys trapped on a beach who can't go anywhere. So, I mean, obviously, he weaves together the issues of time, about week, day, and hour, which makes it a little bit more interesting in terms of how he brings it all together in the end. But he seems to have a more of a, like I said, a much bigger mythological, perspective about home coming to rescue us. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
About like, we're trapped on a beach and we can't get away from this, but yet, we want to get home, but now home comes to rescue. It's almost as if like the second coming type thing, like you're trying to get off the beach, but here he comes. And it seems like he's embracing that idea in some sense.
It's weird, right? Because I don't know if Christopher Nolan is Christian or anything. I don't think there's any like evidence of it. I don't think he is. He might have had, he's British, so he might have had like some sort of Anglican upbringing. I don't know. But certainly he doesn't talk about it in any interviews. He's always just talking about time and mostly the technical aspects of this film. He doesn't really, he talks about the meaning of them a little bit, but it's not obvious, but it does. I mean, I agree with you. And I think it's obviously there. And I think in Tenet, it's the same thing.
Right.
I think we'll get into it, but for sure, that element that's what I'm saying in these recent movies, especially. I didn't like Interstellar that much, actually, but certainly in Dunkirk and this new one, it seems to hit similar sort of these, with this mythological, almost encapsulating story.
This big broad meta narrative, I guess you'd say.
And I think Dunkirk is mostly that meta narrative. It isn't really about, the story isn't interesting, but it's more about this sort of overarching narrative that is playing out. It's almost cosmic narrative, I think. And with Tenet, it's obviously more of a personal story, but I think the same thing is playing out as well, but just the characters are more involved in it than in Dunkirk, or they're more active and they actually can do something. And in Dunkirk, they're just trying to survive. And so that makes the characters less interesting because they're not really, things are happening to them, they're not really doing anything. That's one of the inherent like weak points, I guess, of Dunkirk. Although I don't mind it, because there's no way you can get around that with such a scenario. So
I think the Prestige, at the very end of the Prestige, I don't remember Hugh Jackman's character. I can't remember his name, but when he's sitting there dying because he's just been shot, he says some lines there, which basically I think in essence give away Christopher Nolan's worldview, which he basically says that the world is solid all the way through. and I'm just here to show them a little bit of magic. And if I can make them wonder for a minute, I've basically done my job. But his perspective is there is no magic in the world, that it's solid all the way through. And I think, and I just had perspective in terms of Memento, where Memento at the end, he's wandering along thinking, I have to think of a world outside myself.
Yeah.
He doesn't really know it, and he's confused, and everything's distorted and jumbled around him.
Right.
He still has to believe in it, even though you go, well, does such a world exist? Does that world really exist?
Yeah.
And it seems like he's wrestling with that for much of his earlier films. Now, Dark Knight becomes a very strong allegory. I mean, in essence, that Christ allegory, that the Dark Knight becomes, obviously, he chooses to be the villain in order to find salvation for the people. I mean, he combats the satanic figure, which is the Joker, the Antichrist, in order to best him at his own game. So he does have these themes that run all the way through. And in Interstellar, obviously, that organ music, the organ.
Yeah.
I mean, the heavens, man, they're going off into heaven. I mean, and obviously, do not go gently into that good night. They're going off into death. I mean, they're talking about the afterlife and all that stuff. So, I mean, he's definitely dealing with all of these different things, even though he seems to not take a specifically religious point of view. He definitely is bringing those themes into his films and keeps alluding back to them. Probably because he knows that, I would say for the most part, that's the thing that everybody knows. He's going back to a well of water that everybody drinks from. So
I wonder how much of that is intuitive for him, or whether it's actually a conscious decision on his part. I mean, I know he writes with his brother, so I don't know anything about him. Although I think that he wrote Tenet on his own, and
same with not Interstellar. Jonathan wrote that with him, but I think Inception as well. He did it by himself.
Right. So I mean, is Jonathan the co-writer, or are they both like at this, or is it all Nolan, Christopher writing it, and then just I think that would change the things as well.
I can't remember, but they go back way far. So when the idea for Memento came from one of them, and Jonathan went off and wrote a short story about it and got it published in a magazine, and Christopher Nolan went and did a screenplay. So they both separated in that sense. They're both writers to begin with. And so sometimes they get involved. I mean, Jonathan's done other works besides. He's written other screenplays. I have to go look at his screen credits, but he's done other non-Nolan films. In fact, Interstellar was originally a non-Nolan film. It was going to be a Steven Spielberg film, and it was going to be written by Jonathan Nolan, and only Christopher Nolan got brought in after the fact. In years later. But anyway, so sometimes they work together, sometimes they don't. They're kind of independent of each other, but they obviously share a lot in common in terms of their ideas and that they want to incorporate in their films. I can't remember what I was going to say, but anyway, his worldview, I think like that organ music, like he deliberately chose that for Hans Zimmer. He said, I'd like for an organ to be in it because he wanted that religious. He basically says, when you go into a cathedral, you look up, and that's what he wants, this idea of looking up into heaven as kind of this otherworldly. But whether or not he actually believes or not, like Sato in Inception, we talked about this morning. Sato in Inception, when he says, "I'm here to call you back to a dream that you once knew," and say that this world is not the real. That there's something we can be young men again, and you're like, wow. I mean, that touches at least the heart. But whether or not he actually believes that or not, but he's definitely playing with those ideas.
Right.
So
Anyway. He's at least he's a type of existentialist type thinker, maybe. Yeah, I don't. So it's probably something like that. I maybe agnostic.
and definitely, and I would say at least conservative. And that's all I'm saying, is that even if he's agnostic or atheist, he's definitely on the conservative side. He's not out there trying to undo society. He's basically saying there are some like for instance, just the idea like in Mad Max Fury Road, which George Millage does, which basically this idea of this meta-narrative about why men and women exist together, why we need to be together, why we shouldn't fight each other, why there needs to be harmony among the sexes, because ultimately it's for our own survival. Both of us need to come together. So that's a conservative mindset, not that we should, and I think Christopher Nolan relates that over and over again in his movies, this conservative mindset, which basically was like, he sympathizes with the understanding about torture in The Dark Knight, but he openly
Yeah.
rejects it.
That-
And I think that's the tension. He's not like throwing, like it's not like totally unbelievable that someone would want to torture somebody, but he definitely says, even if we go there, we can't go there for very long. We need to pull back and not sit
mm,
there and not be those type of people, not be transformed by the Joker. Um,
right.
so, and that's really because he's wrestling in an era like 2010 or before it came out in 2008, was it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So this is in the era of George Bush, and the whole world is against George Bush. But in essence, the Dark Knight kind of becomes kind of a, I don't know, George Bush type character, but he's calling him to lay down what he picked up to fight terrorism. You picked it up, now lay it back down. You don't just hold on to it forever. You picked up the NSA,
Right.
the spying, all that kind of stuff. Don't hold on to it. It's there for a purpose, for a specific purpose, just like the ancient Romans did gave a dictator for a period of time. So if there's an emergency, they made one of their people a dictator, and then they were supposed to lay that power after a certain period of time, and Caesar wanted to keep it forever, and that's why
Right.
eventually
Yeah. It's funny because the Dark Knight, at least in the Netherlands, there are a bunch of academics that I've heard from on the radio that are now sort of disavowing this movie. Also, The Lion King is also one of those movies that they're sort of disavowing. They still enjoy them, but they disavow them because they think that they're like fascist movies, or they promote fascist values because of the police state and in Lion King some sort of unearned hierarchy of or whatever. It's very interesting to hear like their thoughts. It's like yeah, it sort of works, but it's also completely wrong. It's like it's very strange, a strange way of looking at the story. Anyways, I don't want to get into that too much, but yeah, I think The Dark Knight, the video I did on it, I think for me it really was a movie that it was like a Tower of Babel movie. It's like there's too much order, right? There's too much. Even the very first scene of the movie where they're zooming in on that like that high rise, with the transparent windows, and it's like when the guy explodes the window, and then they go on to the bank. And it's zooming in, and it's this rising tension, and in the beginning of the movie there's too much order, right? He goes to Hong Kong to extradite this guy, and it's all kind of illegal, and they go way too far into their power, because Batman is now part of the establishment. He works with the police, and so because he wants to control everything. He wants to control Rachel as well, because he's trying to find out what Harvey's doing, and he wants her back, and so he's trying to control his whole life and everything, the city, everything. And then because there's too much order now, there has to be something that fights. And then so it opens, and then it's like you have this image of like complete order, this transparent skyrise building, and then the window explodes, and it's just perfect way to open your movie. And actually Tenet opens in the same way, very similar way, although the meaning of it I think is a little different, but it's sort of similar. The opening scene, I think all his opening scenes, especially from his recent movies, are just sort of perfect microcosms for what the movie is really going to be about.
Yeah.
And I did the Jonathan video. I don't know if you watched that one on the opening scene of Dark Knight. I talked about it a little bit in my video, but Jonathan really went into the dynamics of that opening scene and how it really establishes the Joker as a character. Like you couldn't do it any better than Nolan did it in that opening scene.
Yeah.
And on who the Joker is as a character.
Did you catch this? I got this recently when he says what it doesn't kill you only makes you stranger.
Yeah.
And that becomes the theme that's made through the film, because I think Batman says later on that what does Harvey Dent and Batman say? The line that they say, I can't remember how they say it, but basically if you don't die young, you live long enough to become the villain.
You either die as a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Yeah,
that's exactly the message that the Joker gives in the beginning, his first line, or at least his main line when he takes off the mask, which is whatever doesn't kill you only makes you strange.
Yeah, that's the whole. You should really watch the Jonathan video on it. It made complete sense after like, oh, okay. I think he actually compares it to all of this stuff that's going on, especially in the US, but also here in the Netherlands with all the protests and stuff, and all these, you know, first you had like the feminists, and now the feminists are fighting the black feminists, and the black feminists are fighting the trans, and it's like this fight for the hierarchy, right? And it's like they're trying to, it's like he says Joker's like he's the embodiment of revolution, of the cycle of like revolution to topple the hierarchy, and then but then, you know, eventually they have to the revolutionary cycle eventually has to stop, so they have to eventually because everyone, okay, let me start this over. So let's say if the feminists get on top, and then people beneath them, they want the power, so they have to topple the feminists, but then the feminists now have to also critique the ones beneath them. And so it's like this the Joker obviously just wants like this complete cycle that never ends.
And if you read Genesis, you know, the story, right? When the curse, you know, you read the curse of Genesis, you have the serpent cursed to eat the dust. You have the woman at war with the serpent at war with the woman at war with the man, and the man at war with the woman, and the man at war with the ground until he returns to the dust and death to be
exactly. That's exactly. It's the same. So it's the same pattern. Yeah. So, and I didn't think about it like that deeply, but that really opened my eyes. And he used comparisons to, you know, the revolutions in France and in Russia. How Stalin stopped that cycle, because he purged everyone also to make sure that there was a new hierarchy, and this revolutionary cycle wouldn't end up eating him as well. But that was, you know, I think Christopher Nolan really nails it every time. That's why, especially in this movie, the second time I watched it, I was really paying attention to that opening scene and to find the meaning of it. I think it really did clear up a couple of things for me as well. I don't know. Should we start talking about it?
Yes. I want to ask you one question though. So
sure.
So do you gravitate to The Dark Knight because of your interest in military history? I mean, is that because, I mean, in essence, these ideas, these philosophical ideas about power and the use of power, and is that part of your personality, or is that just you just like the film for its own sake?
I don't think necessarily. I just think it's really good, a really good movie that just I don't know, it resonated with me. Not consciously because of the military or anything like that. I mean, I do believe in something like a just war or something like that, or the use of force. So in that sense, I suppose, there's some things about The Dark Knight that I can agree with, but it's not like any reason. It was like that's why I like the movie, especially you know, when in 2008 when it came out. I was very young. I didn't really think about those things.
I like your video on Prisoners, symbolism done right. I really like. I've watched that a number of times. I think it's a fantastic video, but noticing the comparisons between The Dark Knight and Prisoners, I mean, it almost like, you know, Denis Villeneuve wanted to, you know, take the themes of that movie.
It's like a Dark Knight for mature audiences, mature audiences. I never thought about it, but it's like, that makes complete sense.
No Joker. There's no character, but basically there is chaos, and there is
So there's people who want to see the world burn, you know, and there's the torture. That was a good observation. I hadn't thought of it. One of my favorite movies as well. I love Denis Villeneuve and Nolan are really my two favorite, like modern, at least, directors. I think I'm looking forward to Dune. I don't know if you watched the trailer.
I did. I watched it this week after it was posted on the Discord. Man, I'm so excited about it.
Oh yeah. I don't know if did you read the book?
I've never read the book.
Okay. No, I haven't. I thought about it, but then there were so many other things that I needed to read first. So like, if I get to it, then I will. But it never kind of happened. I didn't think the trailer looked that good. I mean, I'm sure it will be fine. And it's probably just the company that edited the trailer to market it towards a wide audience. And
I'm pretty much a fan of everything he does. I wasn't a fan of Sicario though. I mean, Sicario was just I didn't find it that great. But like 2049. I thought was fantastic, even though it bombed in you know, Arrival's awesome, Prisoners. So
I agree. I really like Sicario as well, but I can see why that would be the one that I don't know if you've watched Incendie.
I have not, but I would like to watch all of his other stuff. I just can't get it here in the United States. So I have to find it some other route. It's not on Amazon or anything. So.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, I think all his newer movies are the better ones anyways, but especially I think his very first movie, Polytechnique, is about a school shooting, like the one school shooting that happened in Canada. Very bleak movie. I did not enjoy it.
Hmm.
It was well made, but I don't know. I think that was also before all the school shootings happened in the U.S. because I feel like now it's almost very difficult to watch.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like they wouldn't make a movie like that anymore, you know. So, anyways, the yeah, Sicario. I did a video on that one as well, but it's
Did you see his video, his short film that's on YouTube about it's kind of a, it's a silent, artistic diatribe against consumerism and
no.
consumption. I don't know exactly what the name. I'll have to go find the name of it, but just he communicates this thing in about 10 minutes, maybe less, and it's well done. I mean, his directing is just fantastic.
Is it new?
It's, I don't know if it's new or not. I don't know when he made it,
Huh.
but it's. I mean, I guess I would describe it more like a music video without any music, and there's
Yeah.
no dialogue either. It's just simply looks like almost like a art house type student film, but it's the quality of it is so much greater than a student film. It just was like it
Yeah.
looked like the stuff that he makes, and you can
Yeah.
understand his point because it's pretty. I mean, he doesn't actually come out and say what his point is, but watching it, you can figure it out. It's all visual,
Hmm.
and just well made, well made. So I'll send you a link if I find it. I'll send it to you. It's interesting to watch.
Yeah. I will watch it. Yeah,
So
I think that let's go get started because we're
yeah,
going to talk for so long.
yeah, Tenet,
Yeah.
Tenet. So what was your I mean, do you want me to give you my impression, or you want you talk about it? So you walked into the film, no impression. What did you what did you walk away with? What do you think the film was about?
The first time I watched it, I came out of it was a little bit too overwhelmed to kind of figure it out, and then when I asked you to do it, I kind of things started moving in my head, and I was thinking like I think there's something here that might be interesting to talk about. And the second time I watched it, it sort of crystallized in my mind. And I think the main theme is pretty similar to the overarching theme is pretty similar to his other recent movies that we talked about.
Yeah.
I think basically it's again about this question of having faith in the structure of reality and in a sort of reaffirmation of life. I think all that it's in his movies. He explores the notion of time and meaning in life, and whether it's worth living or not, and the notion of what is real and what is not real. And I think the leading motif, I'd say, in Tenet is really the struggle between again two sort of cosmic forces, which we saw in Dunkirk as well. You could call it maybe life versus death, or you can even say God versus the Antichrist,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that also very literally, not just saying from a Christian perspective, because Sator says in the movie that he made a bargain with the devil,
Mm-hmm.
and he's trying. The movie's about the future people in the future have invented this technology which can invert time, right? It can invert reality, so it can in a sense it can invert all meaning, or lead to a breakdown of all meaning and identity, and ultimately to death for everyone.
Yeah.
And it's the anti-meaning or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the Tenet organization is working against that, and is saying like, no, we need to obviously save humanity, and life is worth living, and we shouldn't destroy it, and we shouldn't, other people shouldn't sacrifice us for it. And they're more about self-sacrifice and I guess love and coming together again in family towards the end. It's very broadly. I think maybe should we give a short summary of what the movie is about to set up for people who well, I guess if you haven't watched it, you wouldn't watch this video,
think
right?
most people
We don't actually need to watch. You need to say that.
And I don't think most people have seen it, so I'm not really worried.
You're not going to watch it. No, you're right. We don't have to do that. So I don't know what you came away with the first time.
I think that I'm just going to riff off what you said right there. I think that it comes out in Interstellar as well. The theme of basically that the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Basically, we are destroying the world.
Yeah.
But the tendency among many people is to say, because the world is being destroyed, we shouldn't have kids. We shouldn't live a life.
Yeah.
That basically we should actually, like Thanos from Marvel, basically we we should kill human beings. And I think Christopher Nolan is fighting back against that, is saying, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, we need to save the world, but also prize humanity as well. And I think you're definitely right about that.
Yeah. does humanity deserve to survive,
Mm-hmm.
right? That does, and is it what is it, does it mean anything, does
Yeah.
life mean anything, or some, these are all the questions that he's dealing with, I think, in all of his movies. And I think that's why we pointed out that he's probably, he's an existentialist in a way. And it makes sense that again is a similar theme that is playing out in this movie as well.
And
Look,
did you quite get the so talking about the theme of having kids in a world that so basically the answer to most people is that we shouldn't have kids because the world is getting overpopulated. And in essence, in Interstellar, that's played out with the fact that the people who go out into outer space, they go out to find these planets, these exoplanets. They send all these men that don't have any attachments to Earth. That basically they don't have family, they don't have kids. They go out into the outer space without attachment. But Cooper, who goes, has an attachment, and it's that attachment which ends up being the thing which solves
right,
the crisis.
right,
Because Dr. Mann goes crazy because he's unattached and he has no basically no gravity, nothing to keep him grounded. But in this film too, in Tenet, you have the theme of is it Catherine? Can't remember
the wife.
the wife.
I was going to ask you the same thing because I was writing down some notes and like I don't know her name.
I think it might be Catherine, or I'm not, that's what I'm going to go with for now. I can't.
Okay,
remember.
we'll just go with that.
But she has that moment where he says, if you want to leave, you have to abandon your kid, and she actually thinks about doing it. And that becomes a thing that she has to overcome through the rest of the film. That thing that she, and that idea of not wanting to have kids once you've had kids, that feeling of maybe we shouldn't have had kids or something to that effect, seems to be playing out in his film as well. It plays out in the grandfather paradox, this relationship between families, that you can go back in time and kick the teeth out of your grandfather, kick him down
the basement,
and then beat the hell out of him, and like there's going to be no consequences for you. That basically that there's this idea in the future that they completely abandon the idea that if we kill grandpa, nothing's going to happen to us. So there's kind of this, he deals with this relationship with time, that this time has to be coexist, and that means not just prizing. If we prize our ancestors, that means also prizing our kids. So prizing our kids and ancestors go one and the same, and you can't just prize your kids without prizing ancestors, or at least.
I think, is it maybe a rebuke of the view, a pretty modern view, that people that we as individuals are these atomized things that have no intrinsic connection to anyone else, to your family or anything, and then it's Nolan saying like, no, actually, we are, and that is the very thing that saves us, or that grounds us in reality. And it's a destructive view to just see yourself as this one thing that needs to survive and can do whatever he wants or she wants. It's interesting you mentioned that. I hadn't thought of it.
Well, in Interstellar, when he goes to the Tesseract, and he realizes the bog beings are us. The bog beings are us, and there's some future existence. Basically, it's like this cloud of witnesses that's out there somewhere that's witnessing all these things. And the funny thing about Interstellar, and if you go back to look at it, it starts with documentaries from the Dust Bowl, and those documentaries seem to be about our past, but in fact, they're about a future past, the future's past, which is our future. So in essence, he does this whole swirly thing that we're all interconnected, that basically what happened in our past is also our future, and that we all exist together, and that this cloud of witnesses, the dead who have gone before us, living which will come after us, and that we're part of a continuum, and we all are one and the same. And to say that any one part of us shouldn't exist or doesn't exist, or we ignore ignore tradition, ignore what G.K. Chesterton called the democracy of the dead who've come before us, and ignore tradition, and also don't have kids, in essence, we're dooming ourselves, just like children of men, into an existence which has no meaning and which will ultimately end. So anyway.
Perfect. I think that's very good.
There's quite anyway, so there's quite
we can start at I wanted to talk a little bit about that opening scene I mentioned before. because I think it sets up the central conflict of the movie, or at least in a more abstract sense, because you open at an opera
Yeah.
scene, right, and it opens with that tone, right? Like the composer and all the musicians are all they're tuning their instruments to the right tone, so
Right.
that they can work together. It's basically like a little hierarchy, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's like this little order. They're tuning that to focus at the right point, right?
Yeah.
And then right when they're done, obviously all of a sudden the composer shot and this chaos just erupts, right?
Uh-huh.
And then it just sort of devolves into people are being put asleep by the police. There's this confusion, and it's going away from focus, and this breakdown of like everything basically. And
Yeah.
the police go in, but the police are also a sort of there's a type of false flag attack going on as well, because there's police there's officers who are planning bombs or something in the opera. There's a lot of stuff going on, and especially the first time you watch it, it's very confusing, and it's very difficult to understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sort of you're kind of supposed to feel that, because that's actually what's happening in a way. And then what's his first name? The protagonist.
Oh yeah, the protagonist.
Denzel Washington's son. I forgot his name.
He's nameless. His name is just the protagonist.
The protagonist comes in and he uses that quote, right? He says, "We live in a twilight world, and there are no friends at dusk."
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of it also sort of signifies this descent into chaos and death, and that sort of starts the movie off. And it's really the whole opening scene is about this breakdown, this force that is trying to break down life, break down all meaning, and then the other force that will try and stop that from happening. Obviously, the ending of it is that they escape. He extracts this agent that they have there because he was made, but then he's betrayed or something, right? Or someone betrays him, or the Ukrainian secret police catches him, and then he dies, right? He literally dies, and then he's resurrected. And so I want you to keep, I don't know if you've thought about this, but that opening scene, not only sets up that central conflict, and also, let's say, on a cosmic level, but it's also sort of repeated at the very end. The thing that after I came out the first time I watched it, that I found to be strange in a way, I really expected it to end at the beginning and end at the opera. And I was like, why did they not come back at the opera? Because there's just so much going on there that I felt like there were questions that needed to be answered at the opera. What was going on with the bombs, and what was, there's a lot of stuff going on. And I really felt like, because of the name of the movie and this time travel, like he's definitely going to end it, or he's going to revisit the opera, but it never happens.
He does revisit the same time, because
he does. Okay, so there's the key.
Time.
There's the key. But not only does he visit at the time that's the same, and so he technically does revisit it. He also revisits the same. He revisits like the same, let's say, structure or the pattern of that first scene playing out, but then he transcends it. Well, I think we should get to that a little later, because this is what I just found out, and I was like, oh, I think I understand now why it's the way it is. But we can get that. I think we should probably start really by what I think, and I think he posted it on Facebook as well, is the key to the movie is really in the title itself, right? Tenet. I think first off, in the definition of the word, I think it's defined as a sort of a religious principle of belief, usually based on faith, something that might not be easy to prove, or maybe unprovable, but still, a principle. So, and that, on a more superficial level, that obviously is present in the protagonist and the antagonist. Sator, the bad guy, he kind of believes that life should follow his own will, right? He wants to control everything. He wants to control his own body, even though he can, and that's why he's sort of resentful and bitter. He has cancer. He's going to die. He wants to control his wife, his son, his family. And ultimately, he wants to control reality itself. He wants to be able to play God almost, not even almost. He wants to be able to play God and say, like, hey, if I die, everyone else dies as well. I get to decide what happens. He can go back in time. He can do anything almost. And so he's basically this sort of narcissistic, nihilistic, opportunist person of sorts. And he's very much willing to sacrifice others just for his own temporary gain. Right. But ultimately, he knows he's going to die, but then everyone else will die as well. And then at the opposite end of that, of course, is the protagonist and this Tenet organization, who do have a certain faith in what they call the mechanics of reality, or the structure of reality, and they're willing to participate. They're willing to participate in that story, and they're not really willing to change anything about it. They're saying whatever happened happened. So they respect, in a sense, the mechanisms of life. They're not really. There's also, they, on multiple occasions, they say that they have to not tell each other too much about what's going to happen, because sometimes they have information about the other person, and they can, because that would mess up what would happen in the future maybe.
Right.
So there's also maybe this idea of unearned knowledge or something, and sort of very wary of not knowing what you're not supposed to know. Right. And so, and obviously in the end they value human life as opposed to Seder, and they're willing to self-sacrifice for life and for humanity, and they believe in that humanity should survive, and they're more optimistic or more positive in that sense. And so those are the two opposing tenets, opposing viewpoints, and they talk about it as well. They call each other fanatics and all this sort of stuff. So it's very much woven into the fabric of the film on a more superficial level. But then on when you go a little further, you realize that he's actually also, Tenet also refers to the Seder square. I don't know. Yeah, you looked up. So I wonder what you thought about that.
Did you know about the Seder square before the movie?
I didn't. I mean, I might have seen it, but I had never really gave it much thought. No.
Okay, so I learned about this a long time ago. So I mean, as soon as the word Tenet came out, did I tell you a long time ago that it's going to have this Seder square is going to come up? Maybe I did.
No, I don't know. Maybe I didn't catch it.
Because when I went in the film, I was like, boy, that Tenet, that's right in the middle of that Seder square. And as
yeah,
soon as I watched the film and it says a repo, I'm going,
and you're like, okay.
They're going to use it. They're going to use it, right?
Yeah,
so cool. I was like, so that's what got me off the first time I'm watching. I'm trying to pay attention, but I'm also like picking up on Rotas, and I'm picking up all that stuff, and I'm going, oh, it's there. They're using it. So the question is, like, why do they use it? That's the issue. I mean, obviously, clearly they use it, and obviously they don't explain it, so they're not going to use it in the film or not. It's an allusion to this ancient. And the funny thing is that where does Kat's kid go? She's taken by Anna. She's taken by this nanny to go to Pompeii and Herculaneum.
Yeah.
And that's where they found the Rotas Square.
I know, because that was the one thing that I was like, why does he go to Pompeii? It's so specific, and they mention it twice or like 3 times even. And I'm like, why do they keep mentioning Pompeii? Like I was thinking about the volcano that erupted, like something of that maybe. But then I was doing research, and then I found out that actually they found that Seder Square in Pompeii. It's like
one of the places, probably.
One of the places.
Yeah, because they found it all over the place. But definitely interesting. I thought, okay, yes, so he's definitely playing that. But the question is, so why? Why does he use it? And I'm like,
I think.
Go ahead.
Okay. I don't. Did you have an answer for it? Because
I do have an answer. But go
okay,
ahead.
No, go ahead. Because I just talked a lot.
My answer is that so clearly it's about time. So I mean, the film is about time. He's referring to the Seder Square in terms of time, and this backwards Tenet obviously being the one palindrome where it's backwards and forwards. It can be spelled backwards and forwards, up and downs, all that stuff.
Right.
So it's about time. Now, how he refers to it, now, that it can be, so one of the interpretations of Tenet, and has been for a long time, that it refers to, the Rotas Square, the Seder Square, is that it is an ancient Christian emblem that can be transformed into Pater Noster, which is our Father, with the Alpha and Omega, the A and the O, the Greek signs for the beginning and the last letter of the alphabet, their alphabet. So there you have it. Alpha and Omega, that's kind of the beginning and the end. That seems to be what Tenet's all about. It's about this kind of time inversion, A and O, O and A, that Alpha and Omega, Omega and Alpha. And so Tenet back and forwards being the same thing. Now, why Pater Noster? Obviously the film, is it referring to Pater Noster because our Father? Is it because it's somewhat Christian? Are they trying to make a Christian image here, or a reference here? And I thought, well, where is Father mentioned in the film? And I kept thinking, and I'm like, it's the grandfather paradox. You can't kill your grandfather. You can't go back in time to kill your grandfather. And so our Father becomes an emblem for ourselves, the connectivity of all that we are. The Father is the base of all that we are. You can't go back in time and kill your father. So there's this, I don't necessarily think it's a Christian, they are referring to the Christian interpretation, but they're not referring specifically to the Christian meaning for our Father in the film. But they are this meta-narrative, this mythological aspect of being the bog beings, which is
Yeah.
basically, it is us. The bog
I,
beings are us, that we are all connected to the Father.
yeah, I think, I mean, I would say that maybe, obviously, I don't think they're literally uh, talking about our Father, but like about God. But I do think, in the symbolic sense, I think it's the same thing, because it's the Our Father prayer, which is really about, I think Jonathan made a video about that, about the structure of reality itself, and how God is technically the ultimate principle from which all life springs forward. It's like
All Father.
and that's, I wrote the same thing down about, because that's how it's like, oh, this is what the Seder Square means. So lost my train of thought. The Tenet Square, or the Tenet, is also the organization. They're obviously, it makes sense in that they're also our Father. They're fighting for that hierarchy, or they're fighting for life, really.
Yeah.
And so that made sense. But besides that, it's like you say, it is a type of in the palindrome, right? It's all interconnected, and it doesn't really matter from which angle you come at it. It's always it always comes back to that, to the same thing. It's like a sort of closed circuit, an interconnected circuit, and the story works very much in the same way. Any of the side stories you take, it always brings you back to that central, to the central storyline. And so, considering that the word tenet, you can read it both ways, and you come back to the same thing. It's related to the forward chronological time and inverted time of the movie as well, and they sort of speak to each other, right? They go back in time and they change things, and it's all happening always at the same time. And so it's a type of intertextuality in a sense. And there's like, obviously there's one book, or rather there's a whole bunch of stories which are also, and we talked about it earlier today, that are interconnected in that way, which is obviously the Bible. And so, and this is where I'm going to come back to that opening scene, which I figured out was that, okay, so the Bible, Genesis, and the story of Jesus, they are, Jesus brings the end, is obviously the end, and he brings it back to the beginning, back to Genesis. The story of Jesus, in a sense, speaks to the story of the fall in Genesis, and it's like a double inversion, right? Where you have in Genesis all the tools and the aspects which marked that initial fall in Genesis, the fall of humanity, and this breakdown of meaning and identity and so forth, is then ultimately flipped on itself to bring about the salvation of humanity through Christ. And so you have obviously the parallels. You have Eve and Mary, the two virgins. You have the tree of knowledge, good and evil, and you have the cross where Christ died on. And then obviously you have the death of Adam and the death of Christ. Only the difference is that it's like the pattern is obviously transcended, because through Christ's death, he conquers death through death. And so he uses a trick. He tricks the devil into leading into Hades, and then he saves humanity. And in the very same way, the same thing happens in Tenet, because I was thinking about the opening scene and the ending, but I was thinking about the ending where we see the protagonist in the car and the family reunited. So I was like, okay, yeah, there is, I could see something happening there. But then I think you shouldn't look at that very ending scene, but you should look at that climactic battle right before, really, that whole sequence. And once you put those two things next to each other, you can kind of understand also why Nolan didn't go back to the opera, but went to that Stalsk 12 assault scene, because it's technically a very similar scene or sequence, but he transcends the opening. He brings it right back, like you said. It's happening at the same time as the opera. Let's see what else. I wrote it down here because otherwise I would forget.
I should have took notes.
It's an assault, right? They have a very short amount of time. They're both going into this building. There's a complete breakdown of meaning, confusion. All this stuff is happening. Things are going forward in time. Things are going backward in time. The mission is really to extract something. In the opening scene is to extract this VIP, and the other one is basically to extract that algorithm before it goes off. Let's see. They both they both have.
It wasn't just the VIP. It was also a piece of
the bombs.
Yeah.
Right. And also the algorithm. Yeah, you're right. And not only that, there's two secret teams within the team. You know, in the opening scene, they're basically undercover with the Ukrainian secret police or something.
Yeah.
But they're technically Americans. And in the final climax, they are the insertion team or something like that, or the split team.
Yeah.
You know, but no one else knows that they're actually the split team. So they're like actually undercover working. And so in both scenes, the ending is very similar. They both escape with this explosion in the background. In the opening scene where they throw those bombs and then they go off, and then the same thing happens there. And then there's two cars that are waiting for them. And in the last scene, it's Neil saving them, and the other one it's the van which they started from, and then they are captured. Obviously, it doesn't end well for the opening scene.
Yeah.
But in the final scene, obviously, there is, you know, if there's the opening scene, if they descend into death literally, the protagonist dies, technically, and the ending scene he rises up out of that pit and is technically resurrected.
Well, and also you have in the first one, you have Neil clearly saving the protagonist.
Yeah.
So there's by the bullet, and then in the end he saves the same way the protagonist, but also in the reverse, that the protagonist dies in the beginning. And in the end, it's Neil who goes and dies.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So I thought it was like, holy.
Fantastic.
So, because, and now I understand, like, let's say if Nolan had somehow ended it back at that opera house, the story would have been a sort of a loop, right? But a type of endless loop, which is kind of bleak as well.
Mm-hmm.
But now he ends it almost he has that same dynamic going on in that climactic scene, but he transcends it, right? It's a closed circuit, but there's also the family's reunited, and there's a resurrection, and it's in that sense very similar to what happens in the Bible, at least the dynamic in the Bible. And that made me think that couldn't almost be a coincidence, that they sort of, it could be intuitive, but I thought that was so well done that it just makes complete sense. And obviously, I find it hard to believe that isn't a conscious decision, that operation in the Stalls 12 place and the opening scene aren't, because they're so similar in how they play it, but everything is like, there's like this double inversion which happens, and
it's almost like everything's almost the same, except the setting is different. That's all it is.
That's all it is.
The setting is different.
Yeah, and even the Vietnam scene, that's also happening at that same time, right? So all of it comes back to the beginning and the end, and it's all the same, yet it also transcends the end, transcends the beginning, or there's this trick, right? There's also literally a trick, because Neil is dead, right? But then because of this, he uses the inversion mechanism to technically trick Seder, and because he comes back to life all of a sudden, he kills the guy, and the door is open, and so he saves. Neil is technically the one who saves humanity.
Yes.
And it's interesting that you mentioned as well that he's technically present throughout the entire film. He's present in the beginning and at the end. So he's always there, sort of as a, almost as a spirit, sort of helping, a type of helping hand, sort of unseen. So I thought that really blew my mind. I just thought about it the afternoon. I was like, it just clicked. It was like, oh.
and it becomes, like I said, and this is somewhat, I would say, the spiritualism of Christopher Nolan, is that our ancestors are kind of helping us, even as we ourselves are helping our future offspring.
Right.
And that we're kind of like, we're all in this together. That basically we're not unattached to the past and the future, even though they may not be here presently or we don't see them, does not mean that they aren't really truly in our midst right now. And that we aren't, and that's why he's saying is you can't destroy this world. And that's one of his messages. You can't destroy this world, because in essence, you're doing the exact thing that the future is doing to us. If the future comes back and kicks our teeth in and knocks us down, grandpa down the stairs, that's basically in essence what we're doing to the future. And you can't do that. We're all in this together. We need to help each other out and look at not just for our own survival, but for the survival of both our ancestors and our future offspring. Yeah, it's just a fantastic. Now, did you get, this is what I'm saying, you obviously got the name for Tenet, that it means a proposition, or a religious proposition, but there's another meaning to that, and it means renter. Tenet.
Isn't that tenant?
No, it's the same spelling, Tent. It's tenant. which is
Oh,
renter. I believe it's the same spelling, right? You think it's a different spelling?
I think it's tenant. Well, let me look it up.
Yeah, let me look it up because I just thought that we were just
I
talking
think it's
about
just,
the parable of the tenants this morning.
oh, it says tenant is
Oh yeah,
yeah.
right. It is ENT. It's,
Although I have watched a couple videos on YouTube and people tend to pronounce tenant as tenant.
yeah. I thought
Yeah.
that was I thought it was spelled the same way. In fact, my wife was the one that pointed this out to me. She goes, "You know what that tenant is basically a renter." And if you just look at the sound of it, um,
It
I think
does sound almost exactly the same.
it sounds almost the same. So, and in that
Yeah.
sense, what's a renter? Something that's temporal, something that's only here for a short period of time and will be gone. So that
Mm,
you only occupy your time for a certain given period of time,
right.
and that you're not to say that I'm the beat all end all and the person that should
Mm.
be. But you also see that in the end, you see the 10 and the 10, like 10 counting backwards, the 10 counting backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Basically, the 10 and the 10 is divided in half in that respect. So that was that's creative ways that they put it together. I thought they were
Right.
going to do it like halfway through the movie. I'm like going, oh, you're going to have a 10-minute countdown or something like that. And sure enough, both ways, both teams, 10 minutes,
Right.
10 minutes. You know, red team, blue team.
Exactly.
So I thought that was creative.
Wow, yeah, that's excellent. Well, isn't that crazy just how this is why I'm appreciating this movie more and more, just because I was the first time I watched it, I felt like Nolan maybe was in over his head and maybe he lost track almost of the structure of his own movie. But
Yeah.
now that I've, analyzed it, I'm like, oh, actually, no, this is actually very tight. I don't know about the strict dynamics of the time travel and
Yeah.
all of that, but at least in the story structure, it is, it's very coherent
Yeah.
in that sense. Yeah, so that's very good.
I think Denis Villeneuve really anticipated what Christopher Nolan was going to do next with Arrival. I mean, he was trying to do something like Nolan, and I think
Yeah,
he does capture that. And I just think obviously Nolan wants to do more of an action-packed understanding of it. Uh, his interpretation of it is a little bit different than Arrival's, but they're definitely playing with the same theme there
hmm.
of the whole being where meaning is found. And you see it all the way
Right.
back from the disjointed idea in Memento, where meaning is disjointed, memory is disjointed. There is no connection between this moment and the next. This
Yeah,
moment is unconnected to this moment, unconnected to this moment. And yet in his later films, Interstellar, Inception, he's basically saying, no, we're all connected. It's all
right,
connected. It all comes
right.
together. That's where meaning's found.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
pretty extraordinary.
It's it also reminds me of the idea that we as human beings, um, we don't have the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
We're almost like a dog to an owner. Like the dog, you can only explain so much to a dog about reality and about certain things, and that he'll understand. And
Mm-hmm.
so, or like a painting, where like we can only see a very small part of the canvas, but it doesn't mean that life is all meaningless or that's all random chaos. And I think with Tenet, he slowly shows you the whole picture of the story, and that's also why Neil says you can't, what's happened has happened, and we need to just, we need to participate in this.
That's right.
Uh,
It doesn't give us, this is the nature of fate, but it doesn't give
yeah.
us an excuse not to do something.
Yeah, it's not like they don't go like full determinist, predetermined, and
Right.
everything just you can't help it. And that's also why it doesn't become like this sort of this loop. I think that's another reason why it doesn't become a loop, because then it would be, I don't know. Uh, but it's really, even though you can't see that whole picture, you should have faith in the structure, the mechanisms of reality. And I think ultimately those are the questions, or that's the fundamental choice that Nolan wants us to think about, in the sense that, are you going to have faith in the structure or the pattern of reality and in the workings of this mysterious force which seems to pull everything together, or are you going to take responsibility for your life and actively participate in that and in the unfolding of that cosmic story, or are you going to sit back in apathy or rebel against it and
Mm-hmm.
try to go your own way with all of its destructive consequences,
Mm-hmm.
back to scapegoating and human sacrifice, all for your own gain. Is it going to be that, or are we going to come together in love and self-sacrifice will be the ultimate self-destruction of humanity, or are we going to return,
Yeah.
in the Christian sense we can return to the kingdom, or something like that.
And,
It's and I think that's really what the movie is about to me. And the only thing that I'm still sort of questioning is the meaning of the story of the Catherine, or because she really is, in a sense, the emotional core of the movie with her and her son. Now, I personally don't think, I think that was one of the weaker parts of the movie.
You
Just
don't see the
not
son
necessarily. I
much.
think her performance was all right, but I didn't really feel the chemistry with the protagonist.
Right.
And I felt that his motivation to help her out, because he's kind of selfish in the beginning as well. She tells her that she's kind of sacrificing her, or using her for his own purposes, and in the end, he's like, no, I can't. This is the one thing that I need to help her reunite with her son and get her away from Seder. Obviously, it's a type of journey for her from this sort of apathetic despair, where she's sort of just, she feels like she can't do anything, and she's just sitting back and letting it happen, into a more sort of proactive perspective on life, and where she finds a new life and just, in freedom, something like that. But I don't know.
I think
beyond that,
I think it's undeveloped, and I think you're right. It doesn't come across. But if you look at Interstellar, and you look at the end of Inception, and you go, why is there a mother with a child that has to be in some sense reunited? Because in essence, he gives us the clue. Basically, she's made the choice that, or at least she saw it in his eyes. Seder saw it in her eyes, that she was willing to give up her child to save herself.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that she has to go, no, I'm not going to give up my child to save myself. I'm going to kill this bastard. And that's what she does in the end. Is basically, I'm not going to give up this, in essence. So I think that's the core message that he wanted to get across. I don't think it necessarily comes across that way, or as powerfully as it does in other films. But it seems to be that he definitely wants to see the idea of parent and child coming together, because otherwise there is no parent and child in this film, other than the concept of the grandfather itself. The grandfather paradox.
It's, I think obviously it's a good image, them reuniting at the end, of the image of this potential for new life and youth and fertility, because since she's a woman. So that works. But as you say, I don't think he's done a better job at it than in his other movies. Well, definitely, because that was the whole, and it was like, didn't really feel emotional at all about it. I cared more about, the protagonist and Neil than I did about her whole thing. She has a very silly line, very cheesy, where they're talking about, Neil is explaining how this algorithm will destroy the entire world, and it's just like, and my son. It's like, yes, your son is going to die as well. She has a couple of those very silly lines, very cheesy. Maybe it's because he's emulating James Bond to an extent. But there's a couple of things here and there that I'm like, not so great. But
and you can kind of see how Seder, the son becomes the distinction between the Seder and his wife, because Seder wants to kill his son as well. Because he sees no future to the world in the first place. So basically, he's like, God forgive me for bringing a child into this world that's going to die anyway. Basically, so the idea of that misanthropic idea that we can kill humanity and somehow save the world, that basically we should, and that she is the one who wants to see that continuation. So her heart is for her son. It's almost like a Solomon's baby, I guess you'd say. Basically, who really loved the son more? Who really wanted to see the world and the world survive, is the one who actually sees the children survive.
Right.
Survive, there is no world to save. I really think that Christopher Nolan's dealing with that P.D. James kind of Children of Men type aspect, where a world without children is not a world that's just, not sustainable. Clearly it's not sustainable, but it's not sustainable for us as well. We become meaningless in the sense that we don't have any kids.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of reminiscent of Blade Runner 2049 as well, in a sense. It very similar. Also ends with the reuniting of the father in that sense, and his daughter, as this image of this, its potential for a future, even, or for a new life in a barren world, really. Did you read about the theory that Neil is actually Max?
From Mad Max?
An older, No.
Max. Oh,
That Max is the son.
the son. Yeah,
Yeah.
I heard it. I didn't get into it, but I did hear that theory that someone was saying that.
So it's based basically on, I think, on two main things. It's that, Neil's he's kind of a, we don't know much about Neil even at the end of the movie. We just know that he's been friends with the protagonist for a long time, but we don't get to know much about
Mhm.
his upbringing or his personal life or whatever. And so it's kind of like, why is he here? Like, why Neil? And there's this clue that his name Neil uh, is the end. So Max is an abbreviation of the name Maximilian,
Uh-huh.
and I guess in German, it's like the end is with Maximilian, Lian. But I guess if you write it in the English version of it is with
Uh-huh.
Lien, and so then if you turn it around, then it makes Neil.
Uh-huh.
And so the whole point is then that, well, Neil is he's proficient in, like, he knows a lot about physics, and so
Yeah.
the idea is that, oh, maybe he did like a master's or he studied physics as he grew up later in life, because he knew he had to do this thing with the protagonist eventually.
Yeah.
Like, he becomes friends with him, and then that might then also explain why he speaks Estonian, because remember in that chase in Tallinn, he understands what's being said on the radio,
Uh-huh.
and it's because his dad also speaks Estonian.
Wasn't
Sater.
it backwards? Didn't he say you can't understand it because it's backwards?
No, but he knows it's Estonian, because
Okay.
I think the protagonist says it's Russian or something like that, and it's
Okay.
just no, it's Estonian.
Huh.
So there's some clues as to that why that might be true. It's it's not anything concrete, and I don't think it's been like confirmed by Nolan or anything, but it would make it could make sense that would happen, but it's not. I don't think it's like necessary for the story to be coherent or.
No.
Um,
No, but it
but
definitely is interesting, and that's interesting. I wonder if that was on his mind, because bringing in Max, then Maximilian, then seeing the German and reversing it's kind of complicated.
it
Um,
is kind of complicated,
and
yeah.
so it's possible. I think one of the video I saw that went into it, they said that it seemed that his age would be wasn't appropriate for that, but who knows? I mean, because again, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, and I don't think I think there's just a lot of loose ends that basically says, hey, that basically I'm here for you. I was a friend to you before you were a friend to me, and that they're parting ways even as they're
Yeah,
journeying
I don't.
towards one.
I don't really need it to be true. I think it might be a little bit too neat to have it all sort of come together. I don't think it's a. I wonder if he, it is a coincidence that it's Neil and Maximilian, but it's not. I don't think there's much else beyond it. Maybe he did consciously do it, but Nolan might have want to leave it up to interpretation. I don't know.
It's kind of interesting that Sater and calls himself the antagonist, and
Yeah,
that we have the protagonist who has no other name but protagonist. So
yeah.
we have a protagonist and antagonist. Do you think there's a bit of a yin and yang going on? And do you think that there might be some idea of this swirling idea that we're all in it together, little light, little darkness? I mean, even the colors of the skin, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I mean, so seriously, I mean, it becomes kind of this that they're a dualism, that
Yeah,
basically what
yeah.
Sater is, the protagonist is, and that they're at odds with it. So it's not really like this idea of this one monotheistic God, but that there's these principles that are in duality. And
Yeah, that's right. I think so, because we're talking about those, we talked about the sort of cosmic battle that's playing out,
yeah,
really. And I think it almost has a type of Manichean element to it, the sort of forces of good and evil fighting each other. I think in that sense, there might be some things that aren't like particularly Christian or anything,
mhm,
but
right,
have some weird elements in it. And I think so. I think that's probably true, because I wondered about that as well. Why protagonist and antagonist?
mhm.
Obviously, he's very conscious about just not really doing much of the characterization if he doesn't even give actual names to those characters. So
Yeah, yeah,
there's a reason, and the same with Inception, where it's basically just a film crew,
uh-huh,
almost like type of meta insertions in it.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. I don't know. Yeah,
That is a
I think that
yeah.
makes sense.
I didn't even think about I mean, obviously the protagonist, but it being meta. That's a reference to
Yeah, I think
yeah,
so, because it is, obviously you have a protagonist in a story or in a movie and an
yeah.
antagonist, so it's very on the nose for him to say it. But yeah, I think so. I think it just refers to this type of dualism of light and dark and whatnot. Yeah, for sure.
I found it very interesting too that obviously the windmills are there because they want to refer to a world that's trying to fix the problem of global warming, of climate change, all that kind of stuff. So clearly that is the main message. It was in the main message in Interstellar as well, that basically this world is heading towards some kind of cataclysmic chaos in the future, and we need to do something now. And obviously that question about whether we should do something versus not do something becomes the question. I think that's what Neil answers in the end, is that it's better to do something than nothing, even if you feel like the universe is predetermined. Like you may think that, because some people, I think that's more along the perspective is, you know what, we can't change anything, so why do anything? I mean, that's basically what the idea is, that we shouldn't recycle because the world's gonna I shouldn't be consumer because, you know, it's gonna go to hell in a handbasket anyway. And what the point of the film is that no, you know, we should live more holistically, even if that world is to come, because fate is not a reason not to do anything.
Right.
So
yeah, excellent. I think I think it really balances that question nicely. It's like, on the one hand, they very explicitly say that you can't just, you know, sit back and let it happen. You actually have to participate in that story, because I think the protagonist asks something like that, because it's like, well, he knows that something is going to happen. So then why does he, if it's already going to happen, like, why does he actually have to do it? It's like a very sort of weird contradiction or paradox almost. But then Neil's like, no, you do actually have to get off your butt and do something. But on the other hand, it's also like, you don't do too much. You can't go back and change the past, but also in the same way you can, there's such thing as too much power, or like too much knowledge, right? We can try to twist nature in what we want it to be. So we have to be in between not doing anything or doing too much or becoming too like radical in that way. We have to sort of balance those two things. And I think that's
it's also a good take on free will versus determinism too, is basically is that, you know, so you know about A theory of time and B theory of time, that basically he delves into it a little bit in well, I delved into it when I did Arrival, but the A theory of time is basically that future does not yet exist, and therefore basically our decisions are free, in the sense that we don't have a future yet, has not existed. And the B theory of time is that no, all moments in time already exist. We are simply living towards the future. And I think he embraces a B theory of time, which is to say that the future is already laid out for us, but does not deny that free will or the choices that we make are unimportant or insignificant to what's going to happen in the future. And I think that participatory is more like a compatibilist, in the saying that they're, in some sense, that free will and determinism are two sides of the same coin, and you can't get rid of one without the other. That they somehow are paradoxically, and he loves that term, paradoxically entwined. That to make free choices, some sense brings about the deterministic future. But boy, that lives in a bunch of theology too. I mean, in terms of whether or not we should do anything. But the point is that free will is important. I think mostly free will is important to meaning, because the choice to do one thing rather than another thing is what in actuality helps us to clue us in on meaning. Because if someone had chosen one thing and only does one thing, what they were only meant to do, just like a robot mindlessly doing, that's just a natural law. A natural law doesn't give any meaning. But someone who chooses to do one thing over another, that could have possibly done this, but did not do that, instead did this, clues us into, in fact, the thoughts that are inside their head, the meaning that they have. So I find that very interesting, that free will is almost indistinguishable from meaning itself, that they're bound up together. And so if we just go with determinism, that the world is determined, in essence, a determined world is frozen like a rock. It doesn't move, it doesn't change, it doesn't do anything. And yet we find in this world that things are changing all the time. And that change, that oscillation, that distinction is what gives us the impression that certain things are meaningful, done by minds, done things that are chosen rather than not. Anyway, I'm getting way off into that. But,
no, that's good.
It's very interesting to me. And I think that compatibilist idea that he maintains is to say, okay, we're determined, but that doesn't mean we can't do anything. That doesn't mean that our choices don't matter, that our decisions are not instrumental to making that world the world that it is. So, and therefore that's the call to action, which is you got to do something rather than nothing, and be part of this world. What is that from? I'll be part of this world. What's
I
that?
don't know.
What's
I don't
that line from? It's a movie.
know. Part of this world.
I'll be part of this world. Hoorah. Anyway,
Wally? I don't know.
is it Wally? I'll be part of this world.
He
Anyway,
says something like,
it's something.
no. He says, I want to live. No, something else. I don't know.
It is from. Um, anyway, another thing I thought about too was when he said it's Twilight World, and he said, "Is that Whitman?" Did you look up the poem?
Yeah. No, I didn't. Oh, are you asking me if I looked it up? Because they said I didn't look up the poem. I just kind of figured the meaning for the story just from the line. But I was going to ask you about it if you did.
I did, and
okay.
So Twilight's in From Leaves of Grass is 1850s book. It says the soft. No, that's not. Yes, it is. The soft, voluptuous opiates shades. The sun just gone down. The eager light dispelled. I too will soon be gone, dispelled. A haze, nirvana, rest and night, oblivion. That's Twilight by Walt Whitman.
Okay.
So it's definitely kind of not a not a nihilistic, but yeah, in essence, oblivion. The idea that
right.
Be over.
Well, then I guess then the reading that I gave you made sense. Then that especially when they say it in that opening scene where the whole theme of that scene is going down into death.
Into oblivion, yeah, not just death, but
oblivion.
I mean,
exactly.
Because some people think about death and they think about an afterlife, but in essence,
oh yeah, no, exactly.
Death that is oblivion. That there's nothing,
just nothing. Yeah.
Which is interesting because I think that really does the idea of Tenet as not just the spelling, if we just go from a misspelling, but the pronunciation of it as renters that are only for a moment and will be temporally gone. That we only occupy a space, and that space is not ours, but is for others as well. Anyway, it's good stuff, man. Good stuff.
Yeah.
You definitely saw more. I mean, way more than I did. I tend to look towards themes rather than how the images lay out, and I like that whole opening shot is very very interesting how it plays out.
Well, I just figured it out just a couple of hours ago, right before, because if we had done it, last Monday, I wouldn't have been able to. Yeah. So it's good that we postponed this talk because it crystallized some things in my mind. And it's just, usually for me, I analyze it and then I get a couple of pieces and then I'll be walking around the house or I'll be taking a shower and all of a sudden it just like pops into my head. I'm like, whoa, something just clicks. It's interesting how that works because usually whatever I'm reading at the time or that isn't necessarily directly related to the work I'm doing, I'll find something that sort of makes something else click for me in the analysis of the movie. It's very strange how that works. Or you'll see something on TV or on because your attention is on it, and all of a sudden you'll pick something out that right at the exact time that you kind of need it. So it's always good to let it wait a little bit and let things come up and.
I've been watching Interstellar for a long time, just like you. Obviously, it's not your favorite, and you're not that interested in it. But to say that I've been wanting to do a video on it, but I'm reluctant to say anything that others have said. For one thing, but also there's stuff in there that I think that people haven't said. But one thing that in the beginning of the film, like you said, the beginning of the film becomes the key to understanding the meaning of the film, some sense encapsulating and a microcosm of the film itself.
Yeah.
The opening shot of one of the opening scenes of Interstellar is that drone that's flying overhead, and he drives after it, uses that thing to pull it down, and it crash lands on the ground, and they pull the guts out of it. And he basically says, "We all have to adapt, Murph." He's like, "It wasn't doing anything. It wasn't doing anybody harm." It's like, we all have to adapt, Murph. He's just going to make it do something more responsible, which is to basically make it a farmer. That so encapsulates it encapsulates who Cooper is in the film, because he's pulled down by gravity. A gravitational anomaly makes him crash land, which ends up causing him to become a farmer, which ends up having him become a kid. So in essence, the film shows us that somebody just like somebody pulled down that drone out of the sky, pulled it down for gravitational anomaly, pulled it down, crash landed it, pulled its guts out, made it a farmer, is exactly what the Bog Beans did to Cooper. by causing him to crash land his plane, cause him to become a farmer.
Wow.
In essence, end up having him go out to find his daughter and create that opening for her to solve the problem. And that's encapsulated in that one scene. And yet the scene, because I watched the movie over and over, I'm like, why is this in the movie? I'm like, well, that's kind of, they're chasing down a drone. But then these little pieces start to go, well, what is he doing? He's pulling it down through some kind of means. He's crash landing it, and he's making it a farmer. I'm like, oh, he does that so many times where he brings these little pieces together. And when you start to go, oh, right, this is so encapsulating. This is the whole reason the scene is in there, is just to explain something about Cooper's relationship to the bog beans and the bog beans' relationship to Cooper. So, yeah.
Wow. I never thought of that. Yeah. Well, that's the same. I think the same thing. Always, if it's a good movie and a good director, usually it's like, if you just look at the opening scene and the ending, and then just look at the movement in between, and also just like what exactly happens in the especially the opening scene, then it can tell you like half of what you need to know to understand the film.
Yeah, and the opening scene of Interstellar is that he's like, pull up. He's in his car.
Oh, yeah.
Then he wakes up from the dream, and his daughter says, oh, I came in here, I just thought it was the ghost, and talks about the ghost from the future. So all these things are put together, and obviously we get the anyway, I won't go into that, but I appreciate your time, man. I think we've been on for an hour and a half, and
I think it's a good note to wrap it up.
Yeah, I appreciate your insights, man. It's so phenomenal, and it's fun to talk to people who are really engaged and obviously know so much like yourself. So I appreciate it, Thomas. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. I'd like to do it again for maybe another movie or a show.
Yeah, so I don't know how I'm going to edit this together and put it. Maybe I'm going to put it up or post it. I might just put it on my Patreon page or whatever for so because my channel is a little bit different, and I know that my people on my channel, they get like frustrated when I don't do what I always do. When I put something else up, they're like, nah, this is like
I know what you're talking about. You should also I don't know if you're gonna do it on Patreon, maybe not, but you can also post it in the you're in the Symbolic World group, right?
I am,
yeah. I think I saw a couple people have posted about Tenet. So I think a lot of people haven't watched it yet. Maybe now they have.
Right.
But I think those people will appreciate, because they know you, they know me as well. So I think it'd be see what other people have to say about it.
Absolutely.
It really, I like doing these talks because it clears things up again and makes me appreciate the movie.
And you go back to it and go, oh, I got something else.
Exactly.
Yeah. Perfect, man. All right.
Good.
Well, sir, you have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Stay safe.
You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.